What pushes a good man to do the unthinkable? Is it a single moment of madness, or a slow, cancerous decay of the soul? We often believe we know the people closest to us, that we can see into their hearts. But sometimes, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that have been sitting beside us all along, smiling, sharing our secrets, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The story you are about to hear is a harrowing journey into that darkness. A tale of brotherhood, betrayal, and a debt that could only be paid in blood. Before we descend into this abyss, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. Every story needs a witness, and we're grateful to have you with us. Now, let us begin. The bond between Leo Vance and Ethan Hayes wasn't merely friendship. It was a form of geological history, laid down in layers of shared experience since they were 5 years old. It was scraped knees on the same pavement, whispered secrets in the dark of a shared tent, and the unspoken pact of brotherhood forged in the fires of 1,000 insignificant childhood battles. They were constants in each other's ever-changing lives. Ethan, with his quiet intensity and methodical mind, was the architect even before he knew what the word meant, building intricate Lego cities that followed strict zoning laws. Leo was the force of nature, charismatic and impulsive, a whirlwind of ideas and energy who could convince other kids that trading their lunch for his was a good deal. Ethan was the anchor. Leo was the sail. For over 2 decades, their vessel had navigated every storm. As young men, their innate natures had carved their professional paths. Ethan secured a coveted junior position at a prestigious architectural firm, his life a blueprint of careful planning and delayed gratification. He was saving for a down payment on a condo, meticulously contributing to a retirement fund, his future as carefully rendered as one of his designs. Leo, conversely, surfed the chaotic waves of the gig economy. He was a brilliant salesman, a natural closer, but the routine of a 9-to-5 job felt like a cage. He thrived on the thrill, the risk, the immediate feedback of a successful pitch. This hunger for instant reward, for a shortcut past the long, arduous path Ethan was walking, was a dormant sickness in his blood, waiting for the right catalyst. He found it in the green felt of a poker table. It began as a harmless weekly game with colleagues. For Leo, it wasn't just about the money. It was a theater of the mind. He loved the cold calculation, the art of the bluff, the way he could read the subtle tells in a man's eyes, the slight flare of a nostril, the nervous twitch of a finger. He felt alive, powerful. Ethan would sometimes join them, nursing a single beer for 2 hours, watching his friend with a mixture of admiration and a subtle, knitted brow concern. "It's just a game, Leo would say, draping an arm over his shoulder, his voice buzzing with the energy of a recent win. "You think too much. Sometimes you just gotta play the hand you're dealt." Ethan would just shake his head and smile. "I prefer to design the building, not bet on where it might fall." The poker winnings, however, only whetted his appetite. The stakes were too small, the thrill too diluted by friendly banter. He discovered the vast, anonymous, and terrifyingly accessible world of online sports betting. It was here that the itch, a persistent, gnawing craving in the back of his skull, truly began. It started with $100 on a football game, a bet made on a gut feeling. When his team won, the euphoria was electric, 1,000 times more potent than any sales commission. He hadn't just earned money. He had willed it into existence. He was smarter than the odds, quicker than the system. Success bred a dangerous confidence. He won again and then again. Soon, he was living in a different financial reality from his peers. He'd take Ethan to Michelin-starred restaurants, waving off the bill with a casual, "Don't worry, the market's been good to me." He bought a new watch, designer clothes. Ethan, ever the trusting friend, was genuinely happy for him, assuming Leo had finally found a sales venture worthy of his talents. He never suspected that Leo's market was the fluctuating odds of a basketball game in a different time zone. Then, the inevitable tide turned. A string of sure things collapsed in spectacular fashion. A last-minute touchdown, a missed penalty kick, a favored tennis player pulling out with an injury. His winnings vanished, and then his savings followed. The gambler's fallacy took root in his mind. He wasn't on a losing streak. He was just due for a win. This logic led him to chase his losses, the most fatal of all gambling sins. A $500 bet to recoup a $200 loss became a $2,000 bet to recoup $1,000. The numbers lost their meaning. They were just abstract units in a desperate equation he was failing to solve. His charm, once his greatest asset, became his tool of deception. He approached Ethan, his face a mask of earnest ambition. He spun a tale of a can't-miss freelance opportunity that required a small, short-term capital investment. 5,000 E. I'll have it back to you with interest in a month. This is the one. Ethan, who had never known Leo to be anything but a loyal friend, didn't hesitate. He transferred the money, his only condition a gentle, "Just be careful, man. Don't get in over your head." The $5,000 was gone in 48 hours, vaporized in a series of increasingly reckless bets. The shame was a physical entity, a cold, heavy stone in his gut. He couldn't face Ethan. He let his calls go to voicemail. He made excuses to cancel their plans. The easy, comfortable silence they could once share was now filled with the deafening clang of his guilt. When the last of his legitimate credit ran out, he walked into the lion's den. Marcus, the loan shark, didn't operate from a dingy back alley. He ran his business from a sleek, minimalist office, offering short-term, high-risk capital solutions. He was impeccably dressed, disarmingly polite, and his smile never reached his cold, predatory eyes. Leo, blinded by the desperation to pay Ethan back and get even, saw him as a savior. He signed the paperwork without reading the fine print, the exorbitant interest rate a problem for a future Leo to solve. The present-day Leo just needed the stake. He was sure, absolutely certain, that this time his luck would turn. Didn't. The money from Marcus vanished even faster than Ethan's had. And Marcus's demeanor changed with the speed of a flicked switch. The polite reminders became blunt demands. The demands became threats, delivered in a calm, chilling tone that was far more terrifying than shouting. Leo's world shrank to the four corners of his phone screen, a relentless cycle of checking scores, losing bets, and reading Marcus's increasingly menacing messages. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday night, accompanied by the relentless drumming of rain against his window. He had just lost the last of his borrowed funds on a Ukrainian soccer match he knew nothing about. His phone lit up. It was Marcus. "Leo." The voice was as smooth and cold as polished granite. "I'm a patient man, but my investors are not. The grace period is over. You have 1 week. $10,000. That's your original principal plus the accrued interest. Not a suggestion, Leo. A deadline." Leo's throat was tight. "Marcus, I just need more time. A few more weeks. Time is a luxury you've run out of." Marcus interrupted, his voice hardening. "If you don't have my money in 7 days, my associates will be forced to liquidate your assets. And your assets, Leo, are your health, your ability to walk, to see. Do you understand?" Leo was trembling, speechless. "And just so we're clear," Marcus added, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "don't get any stupid ideas about disappearing or involving the authorities. We pride ourselves on our due diligence. We know about your quiet little life. We even know about your best friend, Ethan Hayes, the architect, lives in that nice new building on the waterfront. Beautiful view. It would be a terrible shame if his stability were to be compromised because of your poor decisions." The line went dead. Leo stared at the phone, a cold dread seeping into his bones, colder than any losing streak. This was a new kind of loss. Marcus hadn't just cornered him. He had pulled Ethan into the cage with him. The guilt he felt over the money was nothing compared to the tidal wave of terror that now engulfed him. He had made his friend a target. He paced his tiny apartment, a caged, frantic animal. $10,000. The sum was astronomical, impossible. He had exhausted every legitimate avenue. He was financially and morally bankrupt. He collapsed onto his sofa, the rain outside a mournful soundtrack to his complete and utter ruin. He closed his eyes, his mind a maelstrom of fear and self-loathing. And then, in the deepest, quietest part of that storm, a thought emerged. It was not his own thought. It seemed to come from somewhere else, from the addict, the cornered rat within him. It was a thought about Ethan, but not about saving Ethan. It was about using him. Ethan had money, real money. A few months ago, Ethan's grandmother had passed away, leaving him a substantial inheritance. Leo remembered the conversation vividly. They were having a beer, and Ethan was complaining, half-jokingly, about the abysmal interest rates. Honestly, Ethan had said with a laugh, "I'm better off keeping a chunk of it in the safe at home for emergencies." He had trusted Leo with that information, a casual detail shared between brothers. The thought was so vile, so monstrous, that Leo physically flinched, opening his eyes as if to escape it. No, never. This was Ethan. His brother, his only true family. But the thought didn't go away. It lingered, and it began to twist. The voice of his addiction, now fused with the terror of Marcus's threat, began its insidious work of justification. If you don't get the money, they're coming for him anyway. They'll hurt him. Because of you. This isn't for you, it's to protect him. You could take the money, pay Marcus, and then you win it back. You know you can. You just need a real stake. You can put it back. He'll never even know. You're not stealing, you're borrowing. You're saving him. He stumbled to the window and looked down at the glistening, empty street. The clear, sharp lines of his world, the black and white of right and wrong, had dissolved into a blurry, indistinguishable gray. He could confess everything, shatter the most important relationship in his life, and face Marcus's wrath together. Or he could make one last, desperate, unspeakable gamble. As the rain continued to fall, Leo felt a chilling, terrifying calm settle over him. He was in too deep to fold now. He had to go all in. The 7 days that followed were not lived, but endured. Leo existed in a fog of sleepless anxiety, a state of suspended terror where every tick of the clock was a countdown to damnation. The world outside his drawn blinds ceased to matter. His life had been reduced to a single, obsessive focus, the $10,000 figure and the monstrous, unthinkable act that was slowly, horrifically solidifying from a desperate thought into a viable plan. He made a few last, pathetic attempts at finding another way. He applied for a series of predatory payday loans online, the kind that promised cash in minutes, and was met with automated rejections that felt like digital slaps in the face. His credit score was a wasteland. He gathered his few remaining possessions of value, a laptop, a decent television, a sound system, and took them to a pawn shop. The bored-looking man behind the counter offered him a fraction of their worth. The $700 he walked out with felt like an insult, a pittance that barely paid a single point of Marcus's interest. It was like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. Each failure served as another brick in the wall of his twisted justification. The world, it seemed, was leaving him no other choice. His internal monologue became a constant, desperate negotiation between the man he used to be and the creature he was becoming. The voice of the addict was relentless, a master manipulator whispering in his ear during the long, silent hours of the night. Think of it as a surgery. It would soothe as he stared at the cracks in his ceiling. A painful, precise cut to remove a cancer. The cancer is the debt. Ethan will be saved, and you can heal afterward. He doesn't need to know about the ugly parts. You're bearing this burden for him. This narrative, this grotesque self-deception that cast him as a tragic, self-sacrificing anti-hero, was the only thing keeping him from shattering completely. He clung to it like a drowning man to a piece of driftwood. Halfway through the week, he forced himself to call Ethan. He practiced his tone for 10 minutes before dialing, aiming for a breezy nonchalance that felt utterly alien. His heart hammered as the phone rang. "Leo, man, I was about to send out a search party." Ethan's voice was a blast of warm, uncomplicated sunshine, and it made Leo feel like a creature of the dark. "Hey, sorry, man. Been absolutely buried in this new project. Total nightmare." Leo lied, the words flowing with a terrifying ease. "All good, as long as you're okay." "Hey, I was just thinking, are you free this weekend? I'm heading up to my family's old cabin on Saturday. They're finally selling the place, and I wanted to have one last go-round, you know? Pack up some old memories. It's not going to be the same without you there. You should come. Leo's entire body went cold. The cabin. A place so deeply intertwined with the history of their friendship that it was practically a living monument to it. Summers spent learning to fish off the rickety dock. Winters spent playing cards by the fire, snow piling up outside. It was their sanctuary, a place outside of time. And now it was being offered up as a location. Secluded, private, no neighbors for miles. The voice in his head was no longer a whisper. It was a triumphant shout. It's a sign. It's meant to be. The universe is telling you this is the way. A wave of nausea and a chilling sense of destiny washed over him in equal measure. The cabin, he said, his voice a dry rasp. Wow. Yeah, man. That sounds perfect. One last time for old time's sake. The plan, which had been a formless horror, now began to take on a sharp, terrifying structure. Details slotted into place. He would still cling to the fantasy of Plan A. He would go to the cabin, sit Ethan down by the fire, and tell him a version of the truth. A carefully curated story about a business partner who'd screwed him, about dangerous investors, skipping the part about gambling entirely. He would beg. He would plead. He would throw himself on Ethan's mercy. In this fantasy, Ethan, after a moment of shock, would understand. He would open his safe, give Leo the money, and their friendship, though damaged, would survive. But Plan B was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. It was the plan for when Plan A failed, as he knew in his gut it would. Ethan was pragmatic. He was a problem solver. His first instinct would be to call the police, to involve his lawyer uncle, to face the problem with logic and reason, all things Leo's situation could not withstand. And so, Leo began to prepare for Plan B. On Friday, with less than 48 hours until Marcus's deadline, he walked into a sprawling, brightly lit hardware store. The sterile smell of sawdust and paint felt obscene. He moved through the aisles like a phantom, his paranoia screaming at him that every other customer, every employee in a colored vest, was watching him, seeing his intent. He picked up a roll of industrial-strength duct tape, a pair of thick leather work gloves, and a heavy-duty canvas tarp. He paid in cash, his hand trembling as he accepted the change, his eyes fixed on the floor. He felt utterly disconnected from his own actions, a puppeteer and a puppet at the same time. The final piece fell into place that evening. He was clearing out the trunk of his car, making room for the weekend trip, when his hand brushed against the tire iron nestled beside the spare. He pulled it out. It was heavier than he remembered, a brutally simple tool designed for one purpose. He gripped it, feeling the cold, checkered steel press into his palm. An image, unbidden and horrific, flashed through his mind. The arc of the swing, the sound of impact. He felt a jolt of revulsion so strong he almost dropped it. But he didn't. With deliberate, chilling slowness, he slid the tire iron under his driver's seat. It was no longer a tool. It was a contingency. Sleep that night was a series of fragmented, feverish nightmares. He dreamt he was at a poker table, but the cards had Ethan's face on them. He was running through a forest, Marcus's cold laughter echoing through the trees. He woke up drenched in sweat, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The itch was back, a desperate, maddening craving for the oblivion of a bet. He logged into an old online account, found a forgotten balance of $23, and threw it all on a meaningless, late-night volleyball game in a country he couldn't find on a map. He watched the score update in real time, his hopes rising and falling with each point. He lost. The finality of it felt like a judgment. The universe wasn't just telling him this was the way. It was telling him it was the only way. Saturday dawned gray and oppressive. Leo drove to Ethan's condo, the weight of the tire iron under his seat a constant, cold reminder of Plan B. When Ethan opened the door, his face broke into a wide, guileless smile that felt like a physical blow to Leo's chest. There he is, ready for one last adventure. Ethan said, grabbing a worn leather duffel bag. "You know it?" Leo replied, the lie feeling like gravel in his mouth. The 2-hour drive was a masterpiece of sustained betrayal. Leo played the role of his life, laughing at Ethan's stories, sharing old memories, every friendly word a twist of the knife in his own gut. Ethan, blissfully unaware, was in high spirits. He talked about a promotion he was in line for, about a woman he'd been on a few dates with who he was genuinely excited about. He was a man building a future, brick by careful brick, sitting next to the man who was planning to demolish it. "You know," Ethan said, turning from the window to look at Leo, his expression sincere, "I'm so glad we're doing this. It's been too long. I was getting worried about you, man. You've been distant." The genuine concern in his friend's voice was almost Leo's undoing. For a moment, he considered pulling the car over, confessing everything, and accepting whatever consequences came. But then the image of Marcus's face, the memory of his cold, precise threats against this very man, rose up and crushed the impulse. The addict's voice took over. "You can't. It's too late. You have to see it through." "Just been stressed?" Leo mumbled, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were bone white. "Work. You know how it is." They arrived at the cabin as the sun began its retreat, hidden behind a thick blanket of clouds. The air was still and heavy with the scent of pine and impending rain. As Leo killed the engine, the silence that enveloped them was absolute. He looked at the familiar wooden structure, a place of so much shared joy, and felt a profound, soul-crushing sadness. He was about to commit a sacrilege. He was about to turn their heaven into a hell. The interior of the cabin was a time capsule, smelling of old wood, fireplace soot, and 1,000 faded memories. Dust motes danced in the gray light filtering through the large A-frame window. For an hour, they moved through the familiar space in a strange, bittersweet pantomime of normalcy. Ethan pointed out a carving they had made in a windowsill when they were 12, their initials still sharp after all these years. He laughed, remembering a summer storm that had knocked out the power, forcing them to tell ghost stories by candlelight for hours. Each shared memory, each nostalgic smile from Ethan, was another turn of the screw in Leo's tightening chest. He was a ghost at his own funeral. As dusk began to bleed through the windows, turning the world outside into a canvas of deep blues and purples, Ethan knelt before the stone fireplace, skillfully arranging kindling and logs. "All right," Ethan said, striking a match. "Let's get this fire going, crack open a couple of beers, and give this place the send-off it deserves." The match flared, casting a warm, flickering glow on Ethan's focused face. In that flickering light, Leo saw not just his friend, but the entirety of their shared history, the unwavering goodness that had been the one true north in his life. The carefully constructed walls of his justification began to crumble. This was insane. This was monstrous. He had to try. He had to try plan A. Leo's voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "Before we do that, I need to talk to you. I'm in trouble. Really bad trouble." Ethan looked up from the nascent flame, his expression immediately shifting to one of deep concern. He rose to his feet and turned to face him fully. "What is it?" "Leo, you look pale. What's going on?" The rehearsed lies about business partners and investments evaporated on his tongue. He couldn't disrespect Ethan with such a flimsy fiction. He had to give him a sliver of the truth. "I owe money," Leo blurted out, the words tumbling over each other. "A lot of money. To people you don't want to owe money to. Started small, but it spiraled. They want $10,000. By tomorrow. Or they're going to hurt me." Ethan stared at him, his mind clearly struggling to process this. "What are you talking about? Who are they? Is this about gambling?" The question was soft, not accusatory, but it hit Leo like a punch. Leo couldn't meet his eyes. He just nodded, shame burning his face. Ethan was silent for a long moment, the only sound the crackling of the young fire. When he spoke, his voice was firm, resolute. "Okay," he said. "Okay. This is bad, Leo, but we're not going to panic. First thing tomorrow, we're going to the police. We'll file a report. Then we're calling my Uncle David, the lawyer. There are ways to handle these extortion rackets. No. Leo's voice was a raw shout. He hadn't meant for it to be so loud. No police. No lawyers. You don't get it, E. They're not just threatening me. I tried to tell them I couldn't pay. And they mentioned you. They know where you live. They know your name. Going to the cops will just make them angry. He watched Ethan's face. He saw the flicker of fear, but it was quickly replaced by something else. A protective, almost paternal anger. Ethan took a step towards him, his hands raised in a calming gesture. Then that's even more reason to handle this the right way, he insisted, his voice low and steady. We won't be intimidated. We'll get you protection. We'll handle this together. I'm not going to let anyone hurt you, and I'm not going to let you throw my inheritance away to some scumbag criminals. That's not a solution. That's just paying for the next problem. He placed a firm, reassuring hand on Leo's shoulder. We're brothers, remember? We'll face this, like we always do. And in that moment of unwavering loyalty, of pure, selfless friendship, Leo's last hope died. Ethan, in his goodness, was immovable. He could not be a party to the simple, dirty transaction Leo needed. He would try to fix the root cause, to bring light into the darkness, and in doing so, he would expose everything and endanger them both. Ethan's love and his morality had just signed his death warrant. The addict's voice, the cold, pragmatic survival instinct, took complete control. It was as if a switch had been flipped, plunging Leo's soul into darkness. The turmoil, the guilt, the fear, it all vanished, replaced by a chilling, absolute clarity. Leo forced a small, tight smile. He shrugged Ethan's hand off his shoulder. You're right, he said, his voice eerily calm. You're right. I'm sorry. I'm panicking. Let me just clear my head for a second. I'll grab those beers from the car. Relief washed over Ethan's face. Good man, he said, turning back to the fire. We'll figure it out. I promise. Leo walked out of the cabin into the cold, damp air. He didn't feel the chill. His movements were precise, economical. He opened the car door. His hand didn't hesitate as it wrapped around the checkered grip of the tire iron. He pulled it from under the seat. The weight felt familiar now, an extension of his own arm. There was no thought, no emotion. There was only the problem and the solution in his hand. He walked back inside. Ethan was still crouched by the fireplace, poking at the logs, his back to the door. The fire was burning brightly now, casting long, dancing shadows that writhed on the walls like tormented spirits. Leo raised the tire iron high above his head. Perhaps it was a flicker of movement in the reflection on the window, or the subtle shift of air behind him. Ethan started to turn, a word on his lips. Leo? His eyes, illuminated by the firelight, widened. There was no fear in them. Not yet. Only a deep, soul-shattering confusion as he looked upon the face of his oldest friend. Now a stranger's mask of cold intent, and the dark metal shape descending towards him. The first impact was a dull, sickening thud that seemed to be absorbed by the silence of the cabin. The events that followed happened in a detached, methodical haze. Time seemed to warp, seconds stretching into minutes. He worked with a grim purpose, his mind wiped clean of everything but the task at hand. He found Ethan's wallet and the small key for the safe. He opened the heavy steel box hidden in the bedroom closet and pulled out the stacks of cash, stuffing them into his own duffel bag without counting. The most horrific part was wrapping the body in the tarp. It was a clumsy, graceless struggle with dead weight. He avoided looking at the face. It was no longer Ethan. It was evidence. It was a complication. He used the duct tape to secure the canvas, his gloved hands moving with a practiced efficiency he didn't know he possessed. He dragged the heavy, awkward bundle out of the cabin and into the woods, the damp leaves and twigs crackling under its weight. He followed a half-remembered path to a deep ravine they had called the Pit as children, a place of imagined adventures and buried treasure. With a final, desperate surge of adrenaline, he heaved the bundle over the edge. It crashed through the undergrowth below and disappeared into the blackness. He listened for a moment, but heard nothing but the wind in the pines. The drive back to the city was silent. The stolen money sat on the passenger seat, a mute testament to his crime. There was no relief, no sense of victory. The ravenous itch of the addiction was gone, but in its place was a void, a vast, silent, screaming emptiness. He met Marcus's associate in a dimly lit parking garage. He handed over the envelope. The man counted a few stacks, nodded, and disappeared into the shadows. The debt was settled. He was, by all accounts, free. But as he drove away, the full weight of what he had done began to settle upon him. The days that followed were a new kind of hell. He had to answer the frantic calls from Ethan's parents, his voice a perfect symphony of feigned concern. He had to lie to the police, telling them he'd canceled on the cabin trip at the last minute. He became a masterful actor in a tragedy he had written. Weeks later, he stood in front of his bathroom mirror. He had lost weight. His eyes, once bright and full of life, were now dull, sunken holes in a gaunt face. He stared at his reflection, but he didn't see himself. He saw a murderer. He saw the last look in Ethan's eyes, that flash of confused betrayal. He heard the echo of their shared laughter in the silent apartment. He had made the final, ultimate bet. He had risked his soul to save his skin, and he had lost. The debt to Marcus was paid, but he had incurred a new one that could never be settled. He was a free man who would spend the rest of his life in a prison of his own making, haunted by the ghost of the brother he had murdered in cold blood. The house had won. The house always wins.